that's not a good asset long-term for your basketball game. You need to be able to do more than that. And so I think like using analytics to then just be able to show those things. And from our end too, like I can then pull up all these instances of every single floater you've shot or every single ball screen shot that you've had and be able to watch those in a concise way that's repetition one after the other. That makes it easier then to watch film with players, do things like that. So it's a little bit interesting that it's not just one kind of facet that like makes analytics and development easier. It's kind of the combination of a lot of different things. But I would say that we've continually got more and more efficient with how we're able to approach player development because we have all that information to back up kind of the message we want to send to our players.
Definitely. That's really interesting. Brad, I know that on pitcher development and working directly with the players at Ohio State. I'd love to hear you talk about the relationship with the analytics and driving that to your players and how much you rely on the analytics when coaching.
Me or Dan?
Both, either.
Oh, okay. So my role, I'm kind of Dan's right-hand man. I'm kind of the conduit between the analytics and the, I guess you can call it old school pitching side, where we, the performance and the analytics, the art and the science. So we kind of come in and kind of like Kyle was talking, we'll self-audit, we'll self-scout and try to pick out the lowest hanging fruit of what we do really well, where we need work, what guys have outlier qualities, what characteristics make them successful. And we really, really want to work backward from there. So really start with our strengths and identify, okay, why are they having success with this pitch? Is it spin? Is it release height? Is it release angle? All these small things that you kind of see when you're watching us on TV or a stream, you see the box score. I guess to start that, a lot of times we'll go in and we'll see, okay, he throws these 3 pitches and we can almost grade them or make like a model of what we want him to do. So I guess anecdotally, we had a kid last year who was throwing a slider like high in the zone. Okay, we altered his grip a little bit. We changed where he wanted to throw it. He started throwing it down, started getting a ton of swings and misses. So part of his attack plan that we made for him is, okay, up your usage of this pitch, throw it to this quadrant a little bit more. And we saw he had a ton of success doing that. Now, is it that easy every time? No, there's a lot of different avenues we can take. But I think essentially what I'm getting at here is if we give guys plans rooted in evidence, plans equal confidence. They don't have to guess what they're doing. They can be a lot more confident in what they're doing when it's rooted in evidence-based numbers or what they've done experience-wise.
Definitely. Dan, do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, just a little bit. Goldie's really good at analyzing a lot of the data, especially that's come to us in the last 5 years or so. But I think Kyle said it, it's truths and Brad said, evidence-based. So it's kind of this objective versus subjective, right? So we have this in a lot of sports now, it's this new school versus old school, right? And why the old school gets criticized a little bit is because it was coaches would tell players to do something and that was just it. You just did it, right? Well, now players have become a lot smarter. Just the population, the younger population right now has become a lot smarter and has a lot more at their fingertips where they want the why, right? They want, well, why am I being told to do this? Why am I being told to do this? To grip a pitch a certain way or, to deliver a pitch a certain way or a swing. So they want the why behind it. And I think the evidence or the truth-based objectivity tells a story for them and gives them something that they can tangibly see or feel to help them, I guess, cerebrally. Just because a lot of that, it now tells the why in doing certain things versus just assuming that a coach told me to do it is why I'm doing it.
Yeah, right. Nick, I know you've also had like the experience with the players and your experience with Smartabase. Talk a little bit more just to piggyback on what's being discussed.
Yeah, so I really like what everyone said so far. So like Kyle saying like, hey, this data and this technology is kind of giving us insights to what we might not know. And then Dan and Brad saying, the objective versus subjective piece. where I sit, I mean, ultimately I'm looking at, trying to make the athletes as good as they possibly can be from a performance standpoint, or reducing as much as I can their risk. So from me, like a lot of what we're doing is we're mapping out, what are they doing on the field? How are they responding to that, whether it's objective data like heart rate or subjective data like RPE scales and things like that. And just understanding, can the player handle this load? Can they not handle this load? Are we training them correctly or incorrectly? And for the most part, I mean, to some extent, some of the data that we're collecting is validating what the coaches are doing. So like if we see some motion tracking data on the field and we understand, okay, we gave them this many reps, we're expecting them to run about this much, we want them to run at this speed, we're seeing all of that happen before us. And then it can tell us stuff that we don't know. So like, I think the one thing that we haven't necessarily touched on yet that I think we need to bring up as well is data and analytics isn't something that's going to replace anything that we already have. New school versus old school coaching. The new school coaches aren't replacing the old school coaches. It's just another piece to the puzzle. It's another tool in their toolbox that they can use to help them become a better coach. So everything that we do, everything that I do needs to be validated with context. One of the best examples that I have is you can have, a fourth-year senior defensive back and a freshman defensive back. And you can see, okay, based on his heart rate data, the freshman's numbers are way higher. He must be working harder. Whereas, the reality of that situation could be that the freshman is either more out of shape or he's trying to prove himself and he's just overrunning everything and just not doing exactly what we want him to be doing. So I think everything that we do, we try to make it as easy as possible and pull it into, red, yellow, green scales of this is bad, this is flagged, whatever, but we will never say, hey, if you see a bunch of red flags, you need to do this, you need to do this intervention. More of what it is, hey, this is concerning, go in, check some other things, make sure that it's correct, check in with the athlete, make sure they're doing okay, and then start doing some intervention.
Definitely. Kyle, just piggybacking on that, how much reliance do you think there is on data analytics right now? And do you think there are still a lot of things that still can't be quite quantified by the use of analytics, that there are just things that an experienced player, an experienced coach just understands that isn't yet quantifiable analytically?
For sure. And I think especially there's many things in basketball too. You look at like a flow sport where there's 5 people on the court that are all playing offensive and defensive possessions. And there's just so many things that analytics can't quantify. It's things like a ball screen happens and that's going to completely change how everyone on the court is reacting to that one specific instance. And everyone is then going to have a different end result in that play based on that one specific action. And so I think we're to the point now where analytics, I think, allow us to help maybe like understand how things are changing, but they don't exactly point to like giving you direct, great data about how those like direct actions are impacting the play. For example, I'll say like one of the things that happens all the time is like small ball happens in basketball, and people love to look at analytics regarded to small ball. And for a long time, they said, well, small ball, you're going to get out rebounded. You can't do that. Well, we kind of ran a report in the past couple of years, and we said, hey, listen, like actually when we played small ball lineups, our offensive rebounding percentage for the opponent team went down. And so that was something for a long, long time that you're seeing like analytics maybe close the gap because you're able to look at these things differently. But there's so many of those questions out there that you're able to look at things like a shot. Like a shot is a definitive thing. A turnover is an assist. Those are definitive things that you can tag, you can code, you can pull metrics on. But I think the kind of, I'd say like the play before the play, or like the term like a hockey assist, like I had a great pass due to me drawing help and putting pressure on the defense. And that then created an opportunity for somebody else. Those are, I think, the really hard things. It's multiple compounding efforts that are then impacting plays. And that's where I think it's like we're getting better and better. And you're seeing like more and more analytics companies and more people are reaching out to us with things like motion tracking data, video tracking data. There's companies that put sensors in balls and shoes and providing things like shot arcs. So that's like every single year, I think you're getting to the point where you're starting to address more of those things. But in general, especially like I said, a flow sport like basketball, there's so much that players themselves have to develop that can't necessarily be analytically tracked.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Dan and Brett, I know you have a lot of opinions on that, so I'd like to, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I think one of them that's hard to quantify that we talk about a lot is deception, right? So we can quantify a lot of things metrically on release height, release side. There's technology that tracks extension, but human eye, there hasn't been anything out there to track when a ball jumps on you, essentially, and you've got knees and elbows that are coming at you. That is just, atypical from a stock right-handed or left-handed pitcher from the batter standpoint. And you can't really quantify that. We actually give questionnaires to our hitters to try to see, like, who do you see as the most deceptive pitchers? And a lot of times what we'll see is the most deceptive may not actually have the best, quote unquote, stuff, right, from a pitching arsenal standpoint. So that's the one at least we've talked about, that we talk about frequently in our world. And that goes kind of to the major league level. That's never really been quantified. Maybe that's the next thing out there now with the technology that Major League Baseball is moving into. But right now that's not there.
Talking about non-quantifiable stuff.
Yeah.
The only other thing I could think about, and this is kind of way down the rabbit hole, if you will, is seam shifted wakes or laminar flow on fastballs, which is essentially the wake that the baseball is leaving in the air and where pressure is on the baseball. So some of our tracking systems, so TrackMan and/or Rapsodo, sometimes get broken by two seams or changeups, stuff that has a lot of horizontal movement. And I guess lately there have been people way smarter than Dan and I who have figured out that sometimes the seams will change late in the ball flight and will not give you an accurate depiction of what the ball is actually doing. And that's kind of a new frontier in baseball that I think is still yet to be, harvested, I guess is the right word there. So that's kind of a nerdy thing that we're looking into that we are not nearly smart enough to figure that one out.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of things that our analytics has done a lot, and we're still moving forward. I'm just going to open questions up to the Q&A now. Nick, there's a question for you. There's a big part of your job is you have all this data, and you do a lot of data analysis, and then you have to go and then sell that, and get coaches and people from other programs to sort of buy into what you do. Talk a little bit more about like that sales pitch.
Yeah, I think fortunately we have a lot of good people on our staff. I mean, I think that was one of the best things that I walked into when I took the position, was like right at the time that I walked in, we could to break down silos and break down differences between everyone and just getting everyone kind of on the same page and working together. So it was really easy to make my pitch at that point of just saying like, hey, the sports science stuff, it's kind of new. We've been doing it for a while, but we were kind of doing it with a contractor at one point. Like, this is something that we kind of need to all kind of be in on. And then as we've been hiring younger people, I mean, it's similar to what some of the other panelists have been talking about. Like, the younger community is just more open to it, and they're open to data. They want to know everything. They want to track everything type of stuff. So the selling point is a little bit easier from like a macro standpoint. Now we're always going to struggle with like general athlete compliance and wanting to do it. I think the biggest issue we run into here is just, we ask so much of our athletes, it's hard to kind of ask one more thing over the top. But I have a really good staff relationship kind of with the strength conditioning coaches, athletic trainers, and then they kind of work as my window to the sport coaches and the athletes. So it's kind of just top-down buy-in and belief of just understanding, if I believe in this, and then I can get a few other people to believe in this, and then they can get a few other people to believe in this, it spreads pretty quick.
Yeah, wow, very cool. There's a question I have for you, Kyle, that was just messaged in. So, Kyle, you do a lot of work with video operations and player development. How does that analytics change, or is it the same when involving like recruitment? Are the metrics the same? How are things different? Talk about that process.
Yeah, I think the recruitment analytics is probably the biggest change in the past couple of years, and a lot of that is availability of information, availability of video. We actually try to look at it within the same kind of parameters. And the reason we try to look at it the same is it maybe helps us make causal jumps or it allows us to say like, okay, this player's analytics remind us or look similar to this current guy on our team. And you're able to see similarities to understand maybe how his specific skills like could translate because so-and-so player translated from this way. I'll give you an example. There's a lot of good high school basketball games last night that were exhibitions of some guys that we're recruiting. We capture and tag that video and then add that to basically we keep a database running for each and every recruit that hopefully will have 20, 30 games in it by the end of their recruitment, sometimes even more depending on the availability of video. And we want to break that down in the same way we look at our own self-scouting, because within the context of how we want to play within our scheme, within our system and our fit, if I want a stretch four, then I want to understand like where are his offensive points actually coming from? How is he scoring the ball? If we're going to design our system for a pick and pop three out of a four-man, I want to look and see, hey, off a ball screen pop, what is he shooting from three through hopefully, like I said, 30, 40 games. It's one of the big differences is coaches go and see players in person maybe 7 to 10 times a year. They don't have analytics from those games. They don't have stats from those games. They're relying on their eye. So how can I then try to supplement what they've seen with their eye with a big database of a lot of information that can maybe back up and confirm what they saw, or potentially not confirm what they saw and cause us to go back and say, hey, let's review these games and watch on video again to see, like, is he going to be able to do the things that we think he's going to be able to do based on the position we want to put him in, based on, like I said, a point guard being able to pass and read ball screens if we're a ball screen offense, or a big man that can shoot, those kind of things. So definitely we look at it sort of the same as we do our team, and it's really, really emerging in the recruiting kind of area right now.
Definitely rooting for our team. Question for Dan and Brad. Are there any analytical or biomechanic processes when testing reliever fatigue before a game? Like, say he throws 20 pitches in relief in game one of the series, and then next day game two. Like when it's like on the college level, how is that different? How does that work with you guys?
Yeah, so there's one piece of technology out there called Modus, and it's actually a sleeve that you'll wear on your arm. Now, sometimes it's hard tracking because guys, when they're actually live out on a mound, they don't want to have other things. They're worried about competing and getting guys out, right? But what it will do is it'll track your acute and your chronic workload from a throwing standpoint. So acute being 7 days, chronic being like a month worth. And what it has some algorithms built in. They've actually created a nice app, that universities, colleges, and even Major League Baseball uses to kind of track that. One, just to manage guys. Like, so the example was, can a guy throw 20 pitches and be available the next day? So this will help track, well, have they been throwing over a 30-day period a heavy workload, and then obviously the acute portion of that as well to determine that, because that helps teams, I think, determine whether a guy, we call it just the bounce back factor, if he bounces back quickly or not, and that's very individualized. So that's one piece that is out there that I know gets used a lot throughout the baseball world. And Goldie, I don't know if you can speak to the actual like heart rates. I know a lot of Major League Baseball teams will actually put heart rate monitors on that. And then actually, Nick, you may have some from a biomechanics standpoint, some insight, but Brad, why don't you speak?
Yeah, I think something that we talk about a decent amount here, and I think it's actually quantifiable at the major league and minor league level, is low stress and high stress pitches. So some organizations will use like a catapult. It almost looks like a harness or a vest or a sports bra, and it has wearable tech in it. And it's funny because if you have two guys that throw the same amount of pitches, one guy had a lower heart rate during the time, he probably didn't have as many stressful innings. So we consider that more than 7 pitches in an at-bat, any at-bat with runners on base, anytime you're in the stretch, and normally late inning pressure situations. So 7 through 9 within a game in a save situation, 3 innings. So can we track their high stress pitches, see how that affects them? And I'm sure Nick would be able to probably chat a little bit more. We haven't done a ton on the baseball side because it's very person to person.
Yeah, so most of what I do is kind of around training stress balance theory. So a lot of the daily analysis that we do is based on that acute versus chronic ratio and understanding, you know, where you're trending and where you're going. For the most part, what that's doing, and you can apply that theory to anything you want. It doesn't have to be pitch counts. It can be anything. And essentially what it's telling you is my guy acutely overworked, acutely underworked, or is he moving in the right direction? So I think from a heart rate perspective, I mean, we do that a lot with our different teams. Haven't done a ton with baseball because it's a bit less of a cardiac sport. I mean, I understand it's very taxing on your cardiac system, but it's very different from like a soccer or a lacrosse or something where people are constantly moving and constantly getting their heart rates up and down. But essentially just understanding, you know, if we look at heart rate, that's telling me what's my internal load. So how's the internal of my body understanding, how's my cardiac system taking a toll from what I just did, as opposed to something like they just talked about with like a modus or a catapult, or like we use with our football and lacrosse teams, Zebra. That's an external force. So like what is my body being asked to do of me? And I think it's very important to know the differences between those two, because I mean, going back to my similar example before, like if you have like a 4-year senior versus a freshman and you're telling them to run the same reps, I mean, your external load is going to look extremely similar, whereas your internal load could look vastly different based on, you know, if someone's working harder or less hard, or is in more shape or less in shape. So that's kind of how we use it from our aspect. As far as relievers go, I mean, I don't do a ton of work with the baseball team, but I think everything that they mentioned is pretty good. And then just understanding, like, if you're keeping track of that acute versus chronic ratio, you're ideally keeping that athlete ready at all times. You know, it's not so much like a peaking versus an overworking type thing. You're trying to make sure that they're never really overworking and getting that recovery that they need after their games. The other thing that we've looked into a little bit is neuromuscular fatigue. That can tell you like some micro differences in some of the things that you measure and understand, you know, from a neuromuscular standpoint, from a parasympathetic to sympathetic nervous system standpoint, are you acutely fatigued or not? There's some good ways to do it. I mean, I've heard like grip strength. We've played around with doing some easy like once a day testing like that. We've done like weekly force plate testing. But almost anything you test, I just want to put this out here, like anything that you test, no matter what you're using, whether it's a good device or a bad device, the biggest thing is the consistency in your testing and things that you can't control. So using like the best force plates that I could ever use ever, but if my athlete comes in and just isn't feeling it that day, just decides not to give me maximum effort, it's going to throw all the results off. So just understanding there's a huge difference between, you know, in lab validation and like perfect situations and what you're actually getting on the field, and just understanding, you know, maybe your results aren't as reliable as they need to be.
Yeah, I just want to, that's really great, Nick. I just want to go around the table as we're wrapping up here, just to go to all of you, just to mention anything about analytics within Ohio State athletics that you think the panel should discuss real quick, and our attendees should know. Kyle, I'll start with you.
I think I just want to echo to, you know, I think this has been said before, but I know baseball, like, if you have a dream of and you want to work within sports and analytics, just understand there's a lot of programs out there that would love to be able to have this level of information, to be able to integrate analytics more. But I think it's hard because a lot of times you have staffs that aren't familiar with it or don't know how to digest it. And I think, you know, a lot of people out there, like if somebody reached out to me and they said, hey, listen, this is the information I have, or this is what I can do for you and your program, just to take a look or to talk through or bounce ideas off of, like, we're always trying to improve what we're doing. And just simply reaching out to ask for a conversation can go a long way, just to build a relationship, to maybe eventually work with a program or for a team, because that's kind of what I did. I was a undergraduate student manager at the time here that I just said, like, I found a gap within our program. I started to talk to some people that knew more than me. And then I presented our staff and said, hey, listen, like, this is the kind of things I think I could do if I spent more time devoting, you know, to analytics. And at the end of the day, I got a job out of it. And I think that, like I said, especially when you look at colleges, it's just different depending on the sport, but analytics can help every single sport out there. It's just to what degree. And there may be coaches that aren't quite familiar with it, but bridge the gap, try to give them digestible related things that's easy for them to understand. And I think eventually you're going to find yourself growing within your capacity of what you're able to do from almost sort of dumbing things down at times to explain it to people that don't quite understand. And I think that's daunting. But if you truly believe that you can help somebody or you can provide somebody value information, try to do so, because I think the only thing that can come out of that is good. There can be no bad that comes out of that.
Definitely. And then to that point, Dan and Brad, do you think that the use of analytics has resulted in better record for the baseball program overall?
Well, personally, our season got cut short last year, so it's kind of too early to tell. But what I can tell you is over the last 2 years, we shattered in 2019. We shattered our teams. So Ohio State baseball has been around for over 100 years, and shattered our strikeout record by over 100 strikeouts. And we were #1 in the country last year in strikeouts per 9 innings. So I can tell you that while our season got cut short, I know we are definitely trending in the right direction. And I know the analytics and the data and what the analytics club is helping out with is definitely having an impact. But, you know, like we've said before, it's making everything digestible. It's helping us to communicate digestible information to our athletes. So like Brad alluded to earlier, if you have a plan, it's going to create more confidence for them. And that's exactly what it seems to be doing. But it's also taking that evidence-based truths and putting those together for them. So I guess the one thing to expand on that, and I mentioned this the other day, is that, you know, in the world we're in, I think you're going to see over time that, you know, persons in our positions are going to be more educated. It's not just going to be, we call it the good old boys club, right? Where just because you played in the big leagues or just because you played, you're now, it qualifies you to coach at our level. We're starting to see people in our positions that, you know, are athletic trainers, are biomechanists like Nick, they're analysts, they're strength coaches. And I think there's going to be more and more combinations of that. So the information that people here on this, listening to this panel right now are searching for, we are seeking you out as much as you're seeking the position or to be in our position as much as anything. So the value right now for us personally and our organization, I don't think is quantified completely yet, but I can absolutely tell you it's moving in a really, really good direction. So, you know, expand on that.
How do you expand on that? That was perfect.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you to everyone on the panel, Nick, Kyle, Dan, Brad. It's been wonderful having this conversation with you guys today.